Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm really excited to have Jason Howell, founder of Jason Howell Company, on the show today. Jason is an advisory board member for the XY Planning Network and is also really active with our diversity committee. He spends a lot of time giving back to the profession. Jason started his career in financial services after making a run as an independent candidate for Congress. He first landed at an insurance company that felt like his Rolodex from campaigning would be good prospecting, and ended up transitioning to starting his own RIA. He had passed the CFP, but was only recently able to actually use the designation, which is something we talked a little bit about. Jason has taken a more traditional approach to his pricing, working with clients on an upfront planning fee basis, then AUM for ongoing investment management services. We talked about the various transitions he's made, such as moving custodians multiple times before ending up at TD Ameritrade. He recently brought on a business partner, is writing a book, and has lots of ideas on how to take his business to the next level. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/122. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for our XYPN Radio listeners. It's a community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Jason. Hey, Jason, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Hey, Alan.
I'm excited because we were at XYPN 17 having a beer because one night we sort of split off to these 4 different locations and sort of spread Team XYPN out so people could go do happy hours or bar hop. And you were jokingly offended that I had not invited you to be on the show. And I had actually invited you twice, but had gotten no response. And come to find out, your email hates my email. So I'm glad we were finally able to connect and get you on the show.
And I'm glad as well, Alan. And now to know that you reached out to me and the good guy that you are, you were happy to still have me on the show after my mild offense.
I can't even tell you who doesn't respond to an email when you're building a business, you know?
From Alan Moore. No, the truth of it is it was going to a folder because of an email breakdown. And so my email likes you, Alan. I got your last ones.
No, it's so funny that sometimes you just have to keep following up. And I am awful at follow-up. I'm great at sending the first email. The fact that you got another one actually surprises me. But I was able to go in and search and be like, no, here's the email. But anyway.
Thank you, Gmail.
So for listeners' benefit, kind of give me an overview of your firm, sort of where it stands today, how long you've been in business, how many clients you have, just sort of the broad overview, and then we'll dig into the details throughout the episode.
Sure. Depending on when you want the start date to be, it's just over 2 years. And I say that because I quit my firm that I was working with in August of 2015, but I didn't get approved until the day before Thanksgiving that year, and I didn't get a custodian until January of 2016. So it depends on your start date.
Yeah, sort of a 4-month process.
Pretty much, yeah. But overall, I can tell you it's about 2 years. Right now, I'm managing about 26 households. Let's see, 11 of those are AUM only, which is interesting how that worked out. 3 of them only are financial planning only, and the majority of them are both, which is kind of nice to have. And it's about $4 million under management at this point.
So where are you at sort of projected revenue wise, sort of over the next 12 months without growth? Do you have that number off the top of your head?
Well, I do and I don't in some ways. And so the don't is I'm going to, say that I'm not going to hit the BHAG goal that I started at the beginning of the year with. The do is I am going to hit that goal, Alan. And so 11, what I'm hoping to have by the end of the year is about 100K coming in as the forecasted number. Sort of
your run rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always interesting how, and I didn't realize this until people started asking us revenue of XY Plan Network. And I'm like, do you want the last 12 months, the next 12 months, or the projected next 12 months?
Right.
Those are 3 very different numbers, and I love projected numbers. Those are great because I love making up numbers. And
it's so fun. And it's like, I believe in myself. You know what? Twice what I said.
I'm going to be rich next year.
Exactly.
I love it. So how did you get into financial planning? Has this sort of always been your career?
That's another one where it has and it hasn't. So way back in high school, which unfortunately is a long time ago, I sort of fell into accounting as a elective to take, and I thought it was really easy. And then I looked in the newspaper, which we had back then. The first few pages of jobs were accounting. So I figured I'll just major in this. And I did major in that, and I did that. But while I was in college, I worked at a bank. And that was my first opportunity to bump into one member of the normal financial team, in this case, an estate planner. And he told me that he loved his job because I asked him, because he could hear secrets for the family. I thought, that's interesting. Maybe I could do that. And my first job offer after school was from, at the time they were called American Express Financial Advisors. And I turned it down and took a job where I could actually get a paycheck. But, over the course of my career, I bumped into these firms and considered working for these firms. And up until 2013, I always had an excuse essentially not to take them. And so, with an accounting career and a recruiting career and some political stuff, I eventually decided, let's go ahead and do this one.
Now, you glossed over political career. Not the first person we've had on the show, I don't believe, that has been involved in politics, but this is a really interesting piece. And so I guess what type of politics were you involved in?
I ran for United States Congress in 2012. And
no big deal. Just Congress.
No big deal. Just Congress. Why not? It was people asked me why I wanted to run. And the real sort of impetus and push was a kind of a nerdy reason, which shows how much I should be in this side of the world's professions. I was sitting and working on a book, watching C-SPAN because I'm that kind of a dork. And I saw Congress actually create the opportunity for a U.S. debt downgrade by not raising the debt limit. And of course, we did raise the debt limit in 2011, right at the last minute in August. But that was enough for Standard & Poor's to downgrade us based on politics, which I thought, that's a third world country thing to do. How terrible that we've gotten to this place. And when you think of who's in Congress right now and the generation that's in Congress and the generation I fit in being Generation X, I just thought to myself, wow, I'm a smart person. I've lived long enough to had a little experience, but I haven't lived so long that I'm not current. And my generation is a lot like that. Maybe people like us should be in office. And why not me? And so after I asked my wife if it was okay, I said, I'm going to go ahead and run. And that was how I got in.
No, it's interesting because I've always been, I guess, interested or sort of watched politicians just because it's just like watching crazy people. It's just great people watching. It's a shame that they actually have power.
Yeah,
but it is what it is. But I've never thought about actually running for Congress. I mean, that's a big step. That's not like I guess I'll throw my name in a hat for city commissioner. Like, you went all out. I mean, had you served in any political capacity or elected official capacity in the past, or this was sort of the first run at it?
Whenever I got that question, I'd always say, yes, if you count freshman class president in high school against Emily Hollis, in which case I love using her name. Funnily enough, she ended up living in the district. And so I bumped into her and told her, I always tell people this whenever they ask me. And I came second that year. So this was my opportunity for redemption.
Okay. I was going to say, because if you won, that would be a little meaner. But
no, not at all.
So how do you, and I certainly want to talk about the business, but how in the world do you run for Congress? Like, who do you call? What's your first step? Do you get a campaign manager? Do you start knocking on doors? Is it expensive? Like, what does that process look like?
Yeah, that process is a black box for most people, because that was another question that I've gotten and continue to get. There's a lot of different steps and pieces, almost like getting your CFP designation. And so it just depends on what piece you want to start out with first. Number one, you should know why you are wanting to run, because that's actually the first question that people really ask, or maybe one of the first questions that people ask. So that's it. Number two, recognize you're running against somebody typically. And so you need to know the wherewithal that if you're going to try to take a position, you have to understand who you might be running against and the like. And so these are important things that you want to cross off the list. Of course, what you actually want to do in office is really important, and who you are, knowing that that person that is you is important. But on the actual practical basis, you could start, for example, with your state board of elections, which is typically a much smaller office in your state than you think it would be, and get the paperwork from them. And so step one is a very typically easy form, name and address type stuff that you'd submit. Step two is typically getting signatures, however many signatures are needed to get on the ballot, because the states run the ballots, not even when you're running for Congress or Senate or even president. It's not the candidates that get to say from the federal government, from the Federal Election Commission, get me on the ballot across all 50 states. The states own their ballots. And so you need whatever requirements they have. And in Virginia, to run for Congress, you needed 1,000 verified voters from particular districts to actually be able to get on the ballot. And they recommend you get 50% more than you need. So you had to get about 1,500 signatures.
Yeah, just in case a few get knocked out or can't be verified or whatnot.
They're not registered to vote, or they in my area where there are some transients, because we're right next to a big city, next to Washington, D.C., some people may be registered in Florida, but they happen to live in a suburb of D.C. because they got a job for a while, and they say, I'm registered to vote, let me sign up. And then when they run the name through, it's like, this person's registered in Florida, it doesn't count. And so that process, by the way, can't start until the year of the election. So I got started in 2011, and practically what you start doing is like the business. You start setting up your website, but then when you set up your website, you make a major announcement. In this case, what you do is meet with the people that might care. So you can start building a team of some sort, because unlike business, you can manage a group of volunteers, and it's totally cool. And, start giving them opportunities to serve. And then from there, you look at the different categories of fundraising, of who's going to start helping you with signatures when you're allowed to, all the different categories of managing volunteers.
So, you just sort of file the paperwork, go talk to, you had to talk to 1,500 people then to get, to be able to get on the ballot and just sort of hit the ground running from there.
Yeah, but you remember, you don't start that until the year of. So January 1, 2012, I was allowed to start. So in 2011, and these are things maybe I might recommend that someone do if they're interested in running, but typically somewhere in your state, there's someone or some organization that's offering something like a campaign management school. And there was that here in my area. So I attended a couple week-long seminars that were, 8 hours a day, talking about different categories of building a campaign and building what you needed to do to be at all thinking of yourself as potentially successful. And that was a great education. That's how I knew to build and form committees. That's how I knew about the paperwork I needed to get. You need a treasurer, for example, unless you want to do it. But here's some things you don't recognize. I ran as an independent. And I got this information and thought, for example, I'll get a treasurer, because there's a little cottage industry around politics, of course, like every other one. And I called up a couple of the treasurers on the list, and they asked me, are you a Republican or Democrat? And I said, well, actually, I'm running as an independent. And this particular treasurer said, well, we only work with Republicans. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, do you know any Democrat ones? It's like, well, we do, but is there a Democrat in the race? I'm like, yeah. Well, they're not going to work with you if there's a Democrat in the race. I'm like, really? Okay. So even the cottage industry around it, they pretty much go by Pepsi or Coke. And if you're an independent, there isn't enough money to say we exclusively work with independents. And so it's kind of hard to find the players that you need to join your team who are actually experienced if you are an independent. So that was an interesting learning for me. I eventually did build a team, but it wasn't traditional.
So, based on how things went, I guess jumping to the end of the story is that you were not successful in the run to get into Congress, but are you glad you did it? Like, are you glad you made the push and gave it a shot?
Yes. I mean, a couple things you learn. Number one, not everyone is as partisan as it appears from what we see and what we hear. Most people are pretty reasonable, which is kind of nice. Maybe it's where I live, but I live in one of the most political areas in the country, being the Washington D.C. area. So you'd expect, that's hyper-partisan, and people have their beliefs, but generally they're pretty middle of the road, whatever you might consider to be middle of the road. So that was a cool learning. Number two, people are usually a lot more gentle with their critique than you might expect as well. Not everyone, but the majority of folks. So I walked away thinking that, you know what, there's hope, which was really cool. I learned a lot about what I believe and why I believe what I believe, because you end up having to dig into that so you don't feel like a terrible person when someone stomps off and says, well, I believe differently. If you know what you believe and why you believe, then it won't hurt you as much as opposed to, well, I guess I kind of thought that, but maybe they're right. I'm terrible. So that was a great learning. And then, after the election, I had the benefit of a lot of people that I had engaged. And one of the folks on the campaign was a third generation New York Life employee. And he bought me breakfast a couple weeks after the election, which I recommend. If you know someone who's run for office, buy them a drink, buy them breakfast. They will love you for it, especially if they lost. If they won, then I don't know what to tell you because it never happened to me. Maybe Emily Hollis knows. But you certainly do that. And so he asked me what I was going to do. And I said, I don't know. I plan to win. And he said, well, maybe you should meet my boss. And I said to him, I may have met your boss 15 years ago when I turned the job down then, but sure. And that's what got me on the road to this financial planning side of the financial industry career, because I was in accounting, I was in banking, I recruited accounting and finance folks, but I never said yes to financial planning until this conversation. And so I started at the insurance company, and that kicked me off.
So that's when you really learned about financial planning, was after politics?
Yeah, it kind of went this way. I lost the campaign and I knew I had to get back to work because unfortunately, unlike other people who have lost recently, like Mitt Romney or anyone else, I didn't have a few millions to just sort of be upset for a while. So I had to get going, and I knew I wanted to find a gig by January 2013, I guess it was. And so, I went right in and thought, you know what? I can't sort of write the laws for finance for everyone, but I can help people with their money directly. That's how I kind of reasoned it. And I didn't want people who often came up to me and said, hey, Jason, I voted for you. What are you doing now? I didn't want to say, oh, I'm a government contractor. I wanted to be able to say, I'm doing something that's still, fighting the good fight. And that's how I reasoned it. I'm like, I'm going to go to this firm and I'm going to get into this financial planning and help as many families as I possibly can.
Very cool. So how, what did it look like then to transition into the industry, new to it? You just got done with politics. Like, were you able to sort of tap that network that you had built through, campaigning and that sort of thing? Or did you really, because it sounds like you started an insurance company, so you really started fresh from a business perspective.
I did. And most people thought that I was able to tap a lot of people in the political sphere because of my run. And, yes and no. I mean, there's a lot of things that are yes and no. I guess I'm a true hedging fiduciary because I say that a lot.
A true politician, I believe, is the...
That's, all right, I wasn't going to say it, but that's the other thing too. But yeah, I had a great mailing list of people. And one of the things that I appreciate throughout my career, since about 2003, I've maintained a newsletter. This is my life newsletter. And to the people that have not unsubscribed, thank you, because I've done a lot of things, including running for office, which I thought I'd lose a lot of people and I didn't. And so I just let people know what my next transition was and explained it in my newsletter that I sent out about quarterly. And at least people were aware of what I was doing. And there were a small group, if I'm using the right conjugation of the verb, maybe there was a small group of people that did come along and start working with me. And I continue to work through that over the couple of years that I was there. But it wasn't overwhelming as you might hope, because I was, I had over 10,000 people vote for me. That should have been plenty to keep me busy, but I don't have all their email addresses. So I still had to go and find folks as I tried to do business.
Fantastic. So you got a job at the insurance company. How long were you there for?
2.5 years.
Okay. So how was that experience? I mean, did you learn a lot in terms of sales and that sort of thing, or was it just sort of a grind?
It was a grind. I'll say that. I did learn a lot. And so here I was. I had spent 8 years in accounting. I had worked in banking while I was in college for 3 years. I had gotten jobs for accounting and finance professionals as a headhunter. I thought I knew a lot about finance. I mean, I ran for Congress because of the debt downgrade, so I must be Mr. Finance. I'm with the Budget and Finance Committee. I'm the guy. And I get to the insurance company and realize I know nothing about life insurance. Zero. I just, what? What's happening? How do you do this? What's whole life? What's variable? I think it took me a long time to figure out variable universal life, but learning about life insurance was really great. And it's still great even now to know how that works. I feel like I'm ahead of the game of a lot of other professionals because I started there. And so I learned a lot about life insurance and annuities, a lot about that. And remember, I never interviewed anywhere. So in the insurance business, for some odd reason, the other major companies, as soon as you update your LinkedIn, they want to have conversations with you. And it was so odd to me. So I said, well, I'm not going to change jobs because I got here through a friend. But I'll take the coffee and have a conversation and ask you questions about your firm, just because I know nothing. And I learned that I know nothing. And so I started doing this sort of, I guess, personal MBA on the finance industry by reading industry magazines that I had never heard of, like Investment News and Investment Advisor, and just a whole bunch of ones that were handed to me by other people, and taking interviews with people, even though I had no interest in changing jobs, because they treated me really well, which I can say was maybe even unique to my office. But I felt very well respected, and I really had a good experience working for this particular insurance company.
Awesome. So had a great experience. Why transition then? I guess what caused you to make a move?
Yeah, good question. About 7 months into it. So I started when my goal was hit, January 2013. And about 7 to 8 months later, I was reading Investment News, doing my good research. And there was an article about a 23-year-old, I'll say girl, but a 23-year-old lady from Minnesota who had started her own firm. And my first thought was, you can do that? Because I'm very entrepreneurial, i.e. running as an independent for Congress. But I never even imagined that you could do that. And so I reached out and emailed her, and she was kind enough to take my phone call request. And we spoke for a while about how she did that. And I learned a little bit about what a registered investment advisory company was, which I had never heard of. And she introduced me to two people that she knew in the DC area. One, an estate planner who I'm still in touch with today and who's super nice and kind and actually quite popular, and Michael Kitces.
This is a little known guy there, and you didn't know who he was, but hanging out there in DC.
Oh, no clue who he was. She's like, he's a really smart guy. You'll learn a lot from him. So this is 2013, and I can certainly say in 2013, 14, 15, Michael Kitces was very generous with his time, and most specifically with his emails. So much so that I kind of forgot that he was local. And it wasn't until a couple years later that I actually realized, wait a second, he's local. I could have coffee with him. If he would have coffee with me, I don't know if he would, but I'm going to try. Anyway, over 2 years, I asked some of the most now seemingly inane questions about licenses and RIAs and independence. And he, as long as his blog posts are, he answered them in great detail, which I just ate up. I couldn't wait to read them. And I learned. That was part of my learning about how to do this a different way. And that got me on the path to thinking, you know what, maybe I should. So I always tell people I found out that you could start your own firm in about 6 months, and it took me 2 years to quit.
Fair enough. Yeah, and it's a tough transition. You can't just this quote unquote sales cycle that XY Planning Network has in terms of reaching advisors, educating advisors that are in an insurance company or at a broker dealer or an associate advisor on what life looks like on their own, and then have them prepare and get ready and financially be ready to launch. Like, it can be a really long time. It's not just a few weeks or a few months. Sometimes it's many years. Every now and then we still have people joining that are like, oh yeah, I saw you launch in April of 2014, and now now I'm ready. I feel ready to launch, and good for them. I'm glad they don't rush it, because, that's the quickest way to fail, is to just, push it too fast. So it's amazing. We've talked sometimes about doing like a board to connect all the people who have helped you, so you can say like, these were the 3 most influential people. And I know Kitces will just be at the top of the board with more strings than we could possibly attach.
Yes, he probably will. Him and his blog post about the person who started her firm for less than $10,000. That's gotten more hits than I imagine anything.
Oh, it's so true. But it's awesome. So what was it about, I guess, RIA world that drew you in? For the folks that are out there that are still working at the insurance company and are learning about the RIA world, what was it that really, made you want to go this direction?
Well, I got into, the insurance company in part because I wanted to serve families. That was my head going into it. I was going to help them with all this stuff, all the laws that are affecting money that they don't understand, but that I was studying in a sense to actually go in there and change. I thought, this is my way to do it. And so in the true financial planner sense, even though I didn't have that phrase in my lexicon, I still had the financial advisor phrase in my lexicon. I was going in for that. And what I learned over time was that I wasn't going to be able to do that to the extent that I'd like at the insurance company. And here's what I mean. I knew that the insurance company sold insurance and annuities. It didn't take me long to figure that out. That's where they wanted me to do that, but they never required me to do that. And their minimum for you to do that to retain your contract was, if you weren't doing that, then I don't know how you were eating. Because I was barely eating, doing that. So I was like, that's totally fine, your minimum. But I realized I would spend an hour, sometimes 2 hours with prospective clients talking about everything but insurance. And I was doing something really great for their family. And I would walk out the door at some time of night, because at the time I would be meeting people in evenings and weekends and doing a disservice to my family. Because I wasn't making any money doing this. So, why were you out, essentially? Certainly my wife wasn't asking that, but it was just, I was asking myself, what am I doing? I don't get paid to give them advice, literally. And I know that's what I want to do. And so that was the biggest piece of it, was knowing that I wanted to be compensated for actual advice and expertise, because I believe that was more important, and it was obvious to me, than one particular tool that would be part of the advice. And I figured, becoming an RIA, I have so much flexibility in the ways that I could charge that I'd be able to do that.
So did you have the CFP when you were getting ready to start your firm, or when you're at the insurance company? Because you now have it. So I guess, what was the process of getting the CFP for you? Painful,
Alan. Very painful. Can I say it any other way? Painful. We'll go with the dates here. I spent a year at the insurance company, and in December of that year, I got something from Bryant University that was because I subscribed to everything in this financial world, and so I get a lot of emails even now. And they sent me an email over the Christmas sort of holiday season and said, "Hey, you can save $200 if you buy this now." And I had been thinking about it. It was there. One of the things that the young lady from Minnesota had told me at the time was that she got exempted from taking the Series 65 because she had the CFP in Minnesota. So I thought, well, that's a good idea, but that'll take me forever. What should I do? I don't know. And so when I got this email, I decided, you know what? I'm going to buy it, charge it on the credit card, and I will buy it, and I will start studying for this at some point. And I did start, and then I stopped in 2014, and it wasn't until 2015 that I resumed, at which point I did have to end up renewing my access to all the information, which was painful. And I stopped studying on, I think, the very beginning of June 2015, because I wanted to really leave the firm and started studying for the 65 so I could open up shop. And so it took me about a month or so to feel prepared to take the exam, month and a half. Most things happened to me around my birthday. My birthday is in August. So it was August of 2011 that the debt downgrade happened. Bad timing, because I'm going to do something. I ran for office. And I was looking at my birthday coming up and saying, I need to make a decision by then. And so I said, that's it. June 1, start studying for the 65. I'll go ahead and quit my job so I can take it. And after that, I'll resume. And so I resumed at the same time I started the firm. That's why it was painful. And I only just passed, Alan, this past July.
Congratulations. It's at least you got to take it on a computer. I like to talk about the good old days when we had to take it on a Scantron. I mean, come on.
Scantron in 2 days.
2 days. This whole 1 day, find out immediately if you passed. It's not fair. It took me 6 weeks to find out if I had passed.
Well, and I appreciate that feeling, and I'll tell you why briefly. I used to be an accountant, and so I had the pleasure of taking the CPA exam a handful of times back when it was also 2 days, offered twice a year, and similarly, you didn't find out till much later. Whereas now you take it one section at a time, and you have 18 months to pass all 4 parts. That is crazy. But they're still smarter than the setup of the CFP because basically people are always taking it. So cash is just coming in the door.
Right. Instead of just 3 times a year.
Yeah.
So anybody taking the CFP now, you're lucky.
Yeah. I noticed that last November they changed and I said, you guys changed this for me. Thank you.
We appreciate that. Yeah. So you got the CFP passed, you got launched or got started now 2 years ago. And what was sort of the vision for the firm? What was it? You said you wanted to serve families. Is that sort of as specific as you had gotten and sort of where you planned to focus? Or I guess what was the plan when it came to getting the firm up and running?
Well, for anyone who doesn't believe your mantra of getting into some sort of niche, some sort of specific clientele, they need to think about it a little bit more and reassess how and when they might try to do that. Because in my mind, that is still the clearest way to go about doing things. And I say that coming from an insurance-based company that's all about sales. They were talking about that, getting some group of people.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a part of it. So they saw me as a guy who ran for office and they thought, wow, you should really get involved with people in the political world. And I thought, that's not as easy as you might think, but I think I'd like to do that. You're right. I should. No one's doing that. And then I sort of broke it down and said, well, maybe there's a step behind that and I can work with attorneys. Since I wanted to be a lawyer, my godfather's a lawyer, maybe that's something that I could do. And so I worked that and tried to do that. And I didn't think it worked that well, but I thought maybe I'll put some more time into it and it'll work better. And I continued that effort when I started my RIA. And I can tell you it still hasn't worked that well with that particular niche. So that's what I went into it thinking. And at this point, I've changed sort of that level of specificity and gone more towards the spirit of what I'm doing and what I did when I ran for office, which is working with people who are very involved in the community in one way or another. And that could be a politician. It could be a great nonprofit person. It could be someone who's a catalyst for something bigger than themselves. Those are my favorite people.
So have you found that you're sort of developing this niche focus over time? And a lot of times we talk about niche like it's a menu where you need to just be like, I want to serve veterinarians. But it's really not how it is. It really does come down to who are you the best at serving and who do you really enjoy working with? And how do you connect with those folks in a way that maybe other advisors don't connect with? So is this something that has sort of slowly developed over the 2 years, or was there sort of an epiphany moment where you said, okay, this is the direction I want to focus?
It has developed slowly over the 2 years, and it's changed a lot. And so one niche that was very organic that I still open my eyes and heart to is the niche of people that are Gen X, so a few years into their lives, they've got a couple of kids, and one parent is the 9-to-5er and one parent is the business owner. I found myself with a handful of clients like this without trying, kind of organically. And then I looked up and realized that's me. And so no wonder it kind of works for them. And so I still today answer that way or the other way I just mentioned as far as, who are my ideal clients. And the reason being is more emotional than financial. There's a certain conversation that spouses have about money that gets even more challenging when one person's a 9-to-5er and one person is a business owner. And having lived that and continuing to live that, it's a real opportunity to talk about still finance, but in a way that really matters to that family.
So how was it kind of getting your business started? I guess, what did that process look like for you? Because it sounds like it took a little longer than you were hoping, since the custodial relationship took a little longer to establish.
Yeah, it was iterative, which meant very layered and layered and layered and layered, right? So when I quit the firm, the insurance firm, and I asked them, please submit my U5 as quickly as possible, because they were actually so kind. I thought when I resigned, which it took me 3 times to do, that they would, clear you out with a shoebox and say, get out of here. But they were so kind. And, one of the things I always latched onto was they said, if you need to come back, let us know. And I said, well, I'll hold you to that because I run out of money in 2 months. And so I may just do that. So I knew I needed to be very specific about having them submit my U5 because my email was still working even after I said I was going to resign. And so I was like, you guys, this isn't happening as quickly as it might need to. But they did. Like once I said for sure, my third time, they took a day or two and got that U5 in, which was great. And so right from there, I set up my Series 65, and I had that, and I got that passed eventually. But the situation was I didn't have a custodian yet, and I needed to make some money because I had a very, very short runway. And so I started doing a modified version of the more popularized retainer, where I was charging $2,000 a year, $500 quarterly. So $500 up front and then quarter. And my first couple clients, that's how I charged them while I was waiting to get everything else in place.
So so you said you charged $2,000 a year, but sort of what was the initial plan? Was it just stay with like $2,000 a year plus AUM, or what was the business model that you planned to roll with right out of the gate?
Yeah, that was it. It was always the financial planning with an hourly component, so I could do one-offs and just answer people's questions, which is what I really wanted to be able to do at the time. And then I was going to give this retainer thing a shot. I didn't know how I felt about it, Alan, but I figured I was going to give it a shot, and why not when you don't have a custodian? And I was going to have the AUM component as well. And so I have that now. I still have financial planning and AUM, and most of my clients are both. And I started that way. And then by January of 2016, I was very happy to add the AUM component. I started with SSG because I heard great things about their customer service. And of course, they didn't have a minimum. And surely their customer service is really good. They're good people and they're very nice. What I didn't prefer about their solution was as much paperwork as there was. And so I eventually transitioned over to Folio, which happens to be based here in the suburbs of DC. And so I transitioned to them and started liking that. And then, of course, I jumped up out of my chair when XYPN got TD Ameritrade.
So have you transitioned over to TD Ameritrade then?
Yeah, right away. When the team at XYPN announced that, I started opening new accounts at TD Ameritrade because, I wasn't all the way happy with the Folio solution. And obviously I wasn't all the way happy with SSG. And I thought, well, this is what I really want. It's so clean. It's very much a grown-up custodian. Let me give it a shot. But I didn't want to have to transition people and it be a wrong choice. So I started opening new accounts there, then eventually moved the majority of the Folio folks over.
So what is your fee structure now? Client comes off the street. How do you, and if it sounds like they get to elect financial planning only, investment only, or both. So one, is that correct? And then two, sort of, how do you determine the fee structure for someone that's looking to do both?
Yeah, that's always something I'm looking at. And I recently raised the rates because, hey, I'm a CFP now. But right now, the way it is $1,200 up front and 1%. That's what I market as far as what my solution is. And so I market doing both. No matter what level of assets they have, I want to work with those assets. And for a financial plan, $1,200 up front is what I charge. My ADV allows for a monthly component. I still have a handful of clients that are on that monthly type payment of an annual retainer, I like to say. But I haven't been marketing that piece as much as the much more, in some ways, simplified $1,200 up front, 1% AUM.
Okay. So $1,200 up front. So there's no ongoing fee and it's 1% of assets.
That's right.
Okay. So it really is sort of going back to just charging for planning and charging for AUM. Have you found it difficult to, sell monthly fees for financial planning? Has that been a challenge?
Interesting question, because I have answers that are different depending on the time of the year. When I started I started with XYPN just as soon as I launched my firm. So I was really happy to do that. And I was reading, of course, everything that was being put out about the retainer model. And I wasn't sure that it was a viable thing to do. And I tried it anyway. And I did the $500 quarterly to make it more tuned to what I thought was viable. And very funnily, the first and second clients and third clients that I had all ask me, instead of doing $500 quarterly, can we do this maybe monthly? Like, really? Really, you're saying this to me? I didn't even think people would like monthly. I thought, what is that? Alan Moore, Michael Kitces, what do they know? And I would say no. So we have to do it this way. In part,
we only do quarterly here.
Yeah, because I needed the revenue in part. So I did that, and then I switched to monthly because I realized that's, what people were asking for, but I had an upfront fee still. And then I had the monthly on top of it. And what I came to learn, and this is much more of a business sort of thing and a client type kind of thing. A lot of the people that I saw and that I engaged, the people that said, you know what, I want that monthly, more often than not, they kind of, that was their max that they could afford. And I wanted to make sure that I wasn't seeking those clients out exclusively, because sometimes when that was the most they could afford, 4 or 5 months in, they wanted to roll off because now this, couple $100 was really good savings, and we kind of did all the important stuff already. We think we get it. And so I continue to think about, and certainly have thought a lot about, the fee structure, because I want to make sure that it's not a psychological barrier towards going after this other type of client that may have a more complicated life and a bigger need for complexity in the financial plan and larger assets to manage as well.
So where are you seeing success in terms of getting clients? You said you're in the 26 households, so approaching 30. And so where are those clients coming from? Like, are you having success in one area over the other?
When I look at my client list, I try to see where that is. It is, well, I can say a couple ways. When I started doing the business, especially about 1.5 years in, and I mean even doing the insurance-based firm, my first tiny human was on the way, and I had to make a decision about how I was going to continue what I typically did, which was go networking. I'm very comfortable going out and networking and talking with people and making that work after a relationship is built, but I was doing essentially very scattered, random, this seems interesting networking. And so I decided, no, I'm going to go deep on a few different networks, and that's going to be how I build my networking side of the business. And one of the groups that I joined was a BNI, for Business Networking International, a chapter out here in the burbs of DC. And recently, this year, especially during the time when I was finishing up the studying and prep for the exam, I've been able to have a few clients come out of that. And that was actually the membership, which was terrific because at the time I was doing almost zero actual prospecting because of the studying. So recently it's been from there. Before that, it's been old relationships, whether they were relationships that I had at the insurance company, not necessarily bringing over AUM, but they had an insurance policy, and now we're going to try to do something more than that. And just people that have been in and around my network for a while, and people that I, again, continue to meet doing different kinds of a much smaller amount of random networking, but much more focused on the groups that I'm a part of.
And it sounds like networking is your thing and it's working for you. And so are you just having conversations with folks? They're hearing what you do. They sort of sparks up the interest and they're showing up.
Yes, that can be the case. It's not consistent enough for a company to survive, in my view, unless you're starting with a really terrific base. And so networking is a little bit like saying your business is all referrals. You know that if a business is all referrals and it's in the first couple of years, that there's no way that they could be really making it great. And I think it's the same for networking, though I'd like to say that's the best way to do it. I have experience now 2 years of being an RIA, and I had 2.5 years on the insurance side, and it can make some money, but it's not direct enough to really keep going. So you need to reassess the different ways you're marketing yourself. And now that I've gotten a little bit more flexibility in my time post studying, I'm working on that piece, that marketing piece, be it social media, working on a book, and working on speaking a lot more because I do enjoy that.
A book. So what is the topic of the book?
How money really works. So I taught a class for the past few semesters. This is the first semester in 3 years I didn't get to teach it, a personal finance class at a local university on, like I said, personal finance and financial institutions. And I had a book sent to me, which is what happens, I guess, when you're an instructor. And it was actually a really good book because I was thinking I might use something from the CFP curriculum, but I just decided to use this textbook. There's 17 chapters, and it goes through the entire life cycle of someone from being in college, apropos, to essentially dying. And I would go through all 17 chapters with the students, and they'd walk out of the class, I know, way more informed than their parents, because of course I'd bring in all this real life stuff that I dealt with clients. And I thought, this would be a great basis for a book. And so that's essentially what I'm trying to distill into a very short book, because there's plenty of big books around this topic, but something that's easily consumable for people that are in that Gen X time of life that are trying to just figure out answers to questions that they feel like they should know, but they're not exactly sure, and they want to read up on it real quick.
So you just finished up the requirements to get the CFP and are able to start using the designation. Do you, I guess, how long has that been since you were able to actually use the designation?
2 weeks.
Okay, so it's a little soon to actually gauge how much of a difference, but do you feel like not having the CFP has held you back in some way, or do you think you've been on par with other advisors that already have the CFP?
I think it's very similar to what Michael Kitces wrote in a couple different places. I think it was reproduced in Investment Advisor, Financial Planning Magazine. For me, it's the confidence of knowing that I've gone through the curriculum, even the parts that I maybe was less interested in, and even the parts that were maybe a little hard for me. There aren't too many people that I feel like I'm not good enough for at this point. And I don't think it's the kind of thing where enough people care that it should hold you back and hold back your business development. There are some that do, but the majority of people that I've been able to engage, and even the ones I dream of engaging, I tend to find they don't care because they don't necessarily know what it is. But yourself, though, that's where it matters the most.
That's really interesting take, that it's more about confidence and less about whether or not the client actually knows what it is, because there's a building and growing awareness of the CFP. But we have advisors ask us all the time, do I need my CFP to start a firm? Will I be more successful? And there are benefits. It'll be interesting to chat again in another 3, 6, 12 months and sort of see if being listed on NAPFA and XY Planning Network and FPA and CFP board all require the CFP to be listed. If that generates any potential business, if that's really the bonus, and if clients just truly don't know, or if it really is just your own level of confidence, and I think the answer is you can start with a CFP, but we haven't published any data around this, but we definitely see much higher turnover of members that do not have the CFP, because I think many times it indicates a lack of experience. Sometimes it doesn't. Like in your case, you have a lot more experience than would be assumed by not having the CFP, but I think there's a correlation there, not necessarily causation.
Yeah, and I got into this financial world really because I wanted to know how money works. That was from high school. I was interested in accounting. Who's interested in accounting in high school? I got to work in banking in college, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And then I continued that, and then graduated. And why accounting became less interesting to me, it was pretty rote. Like, I get it. Accruals, terrific. Let's move on. But I'm going to do the same thing every month. And I continue to be interested in this profession because there is always so much to learn. And if you have that mindset, I think that helps you become successful and perhaps stay successful, because that's a lot of what it has to be about, since rules change and laws change, and underneath it all, people change.
So you're writing a book, which I assume is one of the big focuses, just because having written a book now, I swore I'd never do it again.
Do it again, Alan.
It is a hefty process. But I guess what is your focus for the next 6 to 12 months?
I'm going to make it shorter than that. The next few months, basically 12/31, end of the year, is business development and marketing, and forcing myself to do that. Like a lot of people who are RIA minded, that's not the thing that gets you going in the morning. However, you know it's a thing. And so that's going to be a big part of what I'm doing. And it's not really that bad. I see basically being in business for yourself, like a lot of other things you can do, as an opportunity to learn about yourself and the ins and outs of why you are not attracted to that part of an important part of life, which is actually earning money. So I'm looking forward to exploring that and focusing on that in much the same way that I learned a lot about myself in passing that CFP exam and what I had done well in trying to prep, for example, the CPA exam, and what I hadn't done well and actually overcoming myself to get past the CFP exam.
So looking back, you're 2 years in, you're starting to see the success happen. Things are starting to grow. What would you say have been the biggest struggles sort of in the first 12 to 24 months that you've experienced and had to overcome?
Number one, revenue. And I think that's something that continues for a while. In my case, it continues. But revenue has been an important piece of the challenge, and it relates to a lot of other things that you're trying to do. And so I was trying to study while, building this airplane while it was flying. And so I can also say that studying for the CFP exam was a challenge, but it wouldn't have been a challenge if there was plenty of revenue. It just depends on how you want to look at it. I can also blame putting the processes together and how you deliver the results for your clients as a challenge. When I started, I was kind of doing this piece by piece, like we'll work on this section, we'll work on that section. And I think this is an okay way to do it. And now I try to get something out to the client very early on in the relationship and try to build towards the book that can be delivered to a client. And now I'm trying to not only do that, but refine the book that's delivered to the client so that it's a pamphlet or a leaflet or a one-pager. So these are challenges that are ongoing. And let me throw in vendor choices, which you can kind of go down a rabbit hole, because the longer these years go on, is the more choices that there are. And these are areas that are tough.
So what have been, I guess, your greatest successes? What do you look back on the last 2 years and the things that you're really proud of having accomplished and having been able to do?
Piece by piece. Passing the 65 was cool because on the front of the Kaplan book, it says this is the investment law exam. And I wanted to be a lawyer at one point in my life. So, and if you look at the different books, I use all my stuff through Kaplan. The series 6, 63, the 7, the guys are wearing ties and they're looking kind of young. But with the law exam, the guy's open collar because he's that cool. And so I'm keeping that Series 65 book. That was a win. That was terrific. Getting launched, I was waiting for my paperwork to actually come through, and we had revisions to do. And I say we because XYPN helped, and they got those revisions in. I called the state of Virginia because I couldn't wait anymore the day before Thanksgiving and asked him what was going on. And he, long story short, said, actually, you seem like you're okay. I'll call you back in an hour and I should be all set. I'm like, really? Okay.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hour went by and he called. I was like, hello? And he's like, yeah, you should be all set. You should show up on the SEC website tomorrow. Really? I love you. And I had something to be thankful for on Thanksgiving the next day. So that was a huge win, and getting my first custodian. I mean, every piece of it. If you don't recognize how amazing it is, then ask someone to shake you. It's terrific. All the wins are terrific, and all the losses hurt, but remember the wins. They're fascinating, and I have to crown that jewel off with the CFP exam. It was really hard for me to fit that in. There's never time to study. There isn't even time to study when you're in college because you have so much to do. But there wasn't time for this. And to pass that was overwhelming and something that I'm still sort of just thinking about the fact that it's been done.
So what is the goal and the vision for the firm? What are you trying to build here? Is it just going to be you? Or are you going to hire people? Do you want to build the next $1 billion company? Do you want it to be a solo practice? What are you trying to build at this point?
I'm trying to build a company versus just a practice or a business. I have one employee, and we can talk about him in a minute. But what I've recognized, especially when you're looking at your fee structure and the kind of clients you're attracting, there is no mission if there's no money. And I could be a solo practitioner and, kind of Forrest Gump my way through all my weaknesses and rely on my strengths and have a good income. But that's not why I got into it. That's not why someone runs for Congress. I want to grow this firm large enough that I can help a large swath of people and then additionally have freedom to go and do other great things alongside having this firm that's continuing to build and to run and see how many people I can help, how many families I can affect in a positive way. And so I have brought on my first employee, and very thankfully he's serving as both chief operating officer and wealth advisor, because everyone's going to wear two hats in my firm for a little while. And he's helping with the processes and the procedures. He's an MBA. He's an experienced person. He's my age and a real adult. The only reason I was able to attract and retain him was because he was a friend of a friend, and he wanted to get into this business too and preferred not to hang his own shingle and was willing to take a financial hit for a while, and his family was willing to do that. And so I'm really thankful I found a unicorn, and we're going to build this firm hopefully 10x next year, and then we're going to 10x again.
So he came on board. Is he going to be an equity partner, or is he a salaried, or sort of a mix of salary and revenue? How are you compensating someone that doesn't want to hang their shingle but probably could have?
We're going to work towards a salary by the end of this year. It's going to be an awful salary, Alan, just terrible. But we're both going to go on salary. So I'm going to be modeling this. We're both hopefully going to have two awful salaries by the end of the year, and we'll bonus each other because, we can. We're running the firm when there's extra cash there. But the goal is to get everyone in the firm on salary as we progress. And we want to have our first, we want to have our next hire. I want to have the next hire by the end of the semester in the spring, like someone, for example, from Virginia Tech program, bring them on as a paraplanner. Again, another reason I have the CFP is so I can give people credit. So I'm able to give my COO credit because he has the 65 and plans to take the CFP exam. I'm going to be able to give a paraplanner credit, which means we have to give them a reasonable salary for an entry level, which means we need to be, much bigger than we are now by that time to give ourselves something reasonable and pay this person something reasonable, and then continue to grow from there.
Well, Jason, I'm so excited for where things are at for you. And it just seems like you're sort of coming out of this, out of the initial wave and sort of getting to the next step. And that next step being you're able to bring on a partner, even if, you feel like you're not able to pay, adequate wages, still able to bring folks on and to start really scaling up. And it's awesome that you were able to find that person that was the right fit for your personality, and to be able to partner together. Because as we say, business partners are sometimes even more important. It's a marriage, right? And it's even harder to break up a business relationship than a marriage. So it's critical that you find the right people and get the right people involved. But it's awesome that you've been able to find that.
Thanks.
So, yeah, I appreciate you, again, coming on the show and sharing sort of how things are going and what you've been working on. So we'll close out with a final question of if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, sort of that one thing you wish you had known before that you've learned, since then, what do you think that one piece of advice would be?
Nothing happens until a sale is made. It's important to recognize what's happening with your business and that it's a nonprofit until you make a profit. And so, I've read a number of books and websites and articles about this piece, and it's true about how much time you should spend early on in the first couple years of your practice, since it'll be a practice for a few years. And it's upwards of 50% that should be spent on a mix of marketing and sales. And I know that hasn't been the case for me, but it needs to be. It will be these next few months. And it's a piece of advice that I'll lend to others who might choose to follow it.
Just got to spend the time doing the sales and marketing. It's so easy to get caught, I'm working on my business processes, or I'm working on my financial planning software. And it's like, it doesn't matter until you have clients. So go get the clients. And it's a balance. You need both, but ultimately you just got to go knock on doors. You can't wait for the phone to ring.
Yeah, whether it's networking or you hope referrals or good looks or charm, at some point you're going to have to get in the weeds because you hold the salesperson hat, even though it may not be your favorite.
So true. Well, Jason, thank you again for taking the time to come on the show. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Alan.
Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.